the difference between being awake and asleep, not as big as what we'd like to think.
No, not at all. No, I mean, you're right. It's that was the great creative challenge for this of writing this book for me, was to kind of come in as a, somebody who doesn't come from medicine or from science. My background is as a literature major. It seemed like the ultimate creative challenge to try and qualify in the most elemental ways all the ways in which we're aware and how that shifts. I mean, it seemed like literally a completely impossible project. But I thought, since I'm an English major and I've always been about internal experience, like reading literature or whatever, why not take a shot at it? Because maybe I can get away with it, and they would give me more of a break than they would give to some massively ambitious scientists trying the same thing. And what you very quickly realize, of course, you even knew this setting out, is that it's very hard to talk in any kind of to generalize about specific states of consciousness, or to be very specific about it, to say, oh, they're this clearly delineated, because they're not, because they all blur one into the other. I mean, that's the whole thing about consciousness. It's always in flux. It's very fluid. The different states that I talk about in my book, they're really almost more like descriptions of tendencies than they are kind of standalone, impregnable destinations. But it's true. Nighttime mind and dreaming bleed into day, and the daytime mind bleed into night. And that's probably most in evidence in what's called the parasomnias, which I talk a little bit about in that. Should I mention that a bit? Because I find it kind of fascinating. What the parasomnias basically suggest is that consciousness can be remixed, that brain modules that are active at night can also be fired up during the day, and brain modules or parts of brain activity that are active during the day can be fired up at night. You get these unusual kinds of dissociations. And so one of the many examples I talk about in the book is sleep paralysis, which is when you wake up and you can't move. And the reason you can't move is that you still have muscle atonia, which is to say the part of your brain that paralyzes you when you're asleep. Because if you weren't paralyzed when you were dreaming, you would act out your dreams and you could get yourself hurt. This part still stays fired up. So you're there, you wake up and you can't move, and it feels like you got something on your chest, and you often have full-on hallucinations from the dream world superimposed in the real world. So it's just an example of the ways in which these two areas, it's not so delineated, they bleed one into the other.
This is a travel guide of, it's, instead of a year in Provence, it's a year in Jeff's head.
Yeah, welcome to my mind. But I mean, the thing is, welcome to all of your minds, all of our minds, because we all can experience these states, and in fact, most of us do experience these states. What's amazing to me is they're not more well known. I mean, I think it's been kind of because the science community has not looked consistently at internal experience. I mean, they went through a little blip of activity around the turn of the century with William James and the introspectionist movement, but it was seen to be unsuccessful, and then the whole behaviorist thing came up. So there hasn't been a kind of scientific look at internal experience, and because of that, there is now, but because of that, it remained for kind of New Age traditions and religious traditions, and meditation and spiritual experiences and lucid dreaming. That was seen to be in that domain. So it's only now we've been able to kind of talk about it in a legitimate scientific way, and it's still resisted in a lot of quarters. So,
60 seconds. Take me around the wheel. Go.
60 seconds around the wheel. You start with the hypnagogic state at sleep onset, which is the mind becoming untethered and moving from a world filled with sensory input to a world filled with memory. Before we get into full-blown dreams, down into the slow wave, a deep relative absence of slow wave sleep, where there's not much meditation happen, deep sleep. Come back up to a watch, little mini wake-ups in the middle of the night where you have a lot of prolactin in your body. You kind of wake up in your bed, but you go back down. You usually forget them because they're so slow. You go then into the REM dream, which everyone will know, but occasionally you can move into a lucid dream, which is when you become aware that you're dreaming. Then you move into the hypnopompic state. Again, the sleep ones are very strictly happen over a 24-hour period. The day ones get much weirder, and they're not so prescribed. But hypnopompic state is the one when you're waking up. The next one I talk about is the trance state, being deeply focused and absorbed, and particular hypnotists take advantage of this to impose suggestions. So I visit a hypnotist. From there to the daydream, when we're off, pondering who knows what. The one after that is the SM, the sensory motorism, which is basically a particular kind of alert awareness, so mindfulness, and it is what the Buddhists would call it. And finally, the athlete zone, which of course all athletes will know. And actually the last one is the pure conscious event, which is nothingness, which is basically the mind neither awake nor asleep, but the fourth state, as the Indians call it, And you get behind the content of the mind and are able to enter this huge, luminous, empty space and you're one with everything, or something like that, which I don't experience, but I try to.
Do you look at reality any differently?
I certainly look at reality differently. Once you understand that everything you ever experience about the world is a model built in your brain, that pretty much changes a lot of things. It's not to say there's not a real external reality, but you basically go from a reality, a model of the world built from sensory input. Because everything I'm experiencing in the world right now, you sitting interviewing me here, this room, this wood table, your little recorder, copy of my book, it's all comes into all broken up through your eyes and gets routed into the visual parts of your brain and then gets assembled in the higher visual association parts of your brain into a model of the world. That's waking. At nighttime, the model of the world is still there because that's what the brain does. It's constantly building a model of the world, except at night when there's no sensory input, the model gets built from scraps and pieces from your memory and from your experience. So once you realize that you're always moving through a constructed world, it is very destabilizing. It gets you into all the down the rabbit hole matrix stuff.
The book is The Head Trip, Adventures on the Wheel of Consciousness. I'm speaking with the author, Jeff Warren, and The Head Trip, published by Random House of Canada.